want anybody to know what was going on. So I went out the fire escape, stood outside in January in Germany, snow on the ground, it's freezing cold, and called every number I could in that phone book until I finally found mental health. I think some young kid answered the phone, and I'm like, my name is Captain Owens. Something's going on. You're going to make me an appointment today, or I'm going to walk into the office. God bless this young kid. They're like, okay, hold on. It came back and said, can you be here at 1400? Like, yes, I will be there at 1400. Got off the phone. I walked upstairs, and I literally walked into my boss's office. I don't even know if there was a meeting going on or if he was on the phone or something. I walked in and I closed the door. And for the first time, I looked at somebody and I said, sir, I don't know what's going on. Something is wrong. I can't sleep. I'm not who I should be. I just made an appointment with mental health. I'm telling you as a courtesy that I'm going. I loved our three. He just looked at me and he said, Eric, you do what you have to do. If you need time off, it's yours. Just let me know what you need. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, that was like the first time I'd ever opened up to somebody to admit to the fact that I had something going on. And he was so open to it. It was great.
Any of my brothers that are out there, you know, struggling with their deployment or, you know, life in general, you know, I tell them that, hey, to stay strong and to keep holding on and to understand, you know, you're here for a reason and that, you know, your life and what you're doing does have purpose.
Hey everyone, this is Greg Washington and welcome to the next episode of Guards Down. I have with me today a very special friend of mine. I've known him since day one of me wanting to attend West Point and going to the prep school, the United States Military Academy. Eric Owens, how you doing, brother?
Hey, I'm great, brother. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Well, look, tell everybody about yourself.
Thanks, Greg. So, yeah, like you, went to West Point, started at the prep school. I did a few years in the Army beforehand. Never gave up on the goal of going to college, and I actually had a lieutenant that I worked for that was a West Point grad, and he became a mentor to me, and I said I wanted to be that guy, and I ended up following in his footsteps. Met you day one at the prep school, being this, scared little kid that you were, and brought you under my wing, and, you know, we both got through there and went on to the academy, graduated from there with you. We were classmates together. After graduation, went the infantry route. Ended up getting stationed in Vilseck, Germany, 2nd Cavalry Regiment. Did one deployment there to Iraq. Came back to the States. I ended up doing a basic training command at Fort Benning with the 11 Bravos, turning them into fully qualified infantrymen. After to the 101st, did one more Afghanistan deployment, and then that's where I left the service in early 2012. Now I'm in corporate America. I'm a program manager for a distribution company. Got married in 2010 and 4 kids, 2 sets of twins, 8-year-old twins and 6-year-old twins. So I'm definitely a busy man.
Indeed. And well, you know, and we were talking about this before the show, and we were just speaking on how you couldn't make it through the academy alone. And so Eric, having been in the service, going through basic training, and, you know, now switching over and wanting to become an officer and go through, you know, the military academy, he was a instrumental key to not only my success, but other cadets or other prep schoolers at school, right? So, you know, he knew what right looked like, and he established this norm and this professionalism that everyone just kind of emulated, right? Because it was our first time going out in the woods and, you know, shooting rifles and marching and, you know, getting used to this whole military life. And, you know, he's already lived it. So for him to, you know, to come through and to just set the example or be the example for everybody to like follow. I mean, like, and him being a peer, it was a humbling and great experience all in one. So I appreciate you, brother, for, for what you did for me and the rest of my classmates. And even just for today to taking, the time out to help me on a different mission. Right. So, my hat definitely goes off to you.
Hey, I appreciate that, man. You should know as well as anybody. All you got to do is make a phone call and I'll be there for you no matter what it is.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, before we get started, one question I always like to ask my guests that come on, because, of course, we're talking about PTSD and complicated grief and how different cultures view it, treat it, and overcome it, right? So first question I always ask is, did you have someone, whether it be your parents or, someone close to you, teach you how to deal with trauma and grief?
That's a pretty good question. So growing up, my dad was a police officer and my mom was a nurse. And growing up, you heard stories about things that had happened at work, whether it be something that happened where my mom was in the emergency room and, it was a particularly bad case, or, something involving my dad's work. It was talked about, but growing up, they did a very good job at never bringing work home. So I never really saw, firsthand experience of trauma or anything like that. They were very good at, maybe dropping it off at the doorstep and picking it back up when they went back to work. So growing up, I always saw this rock solid example of, two loving parents who were always there and always had a smile on their face and, were willing to do whatever. So in terms of trauma, it was always something that I heard about, or it was somebody else, but I never really experienced it on a firsthand basis.
Got you. Okay, so in having both parents there and both of them being, workers, right? Civil servants, your father being a police officer and your mom being a nurse. Tell me about the culture, right, of basically like how your coping skills. Did you learn more from your mom or did you learn more from, your dad?
I'd say it was probably fairly equal. From my mom, I would say that I learned, sympathy and empathy from her, dealing with patients in whatever part of the hospital that she was working with. And, from my dad, it was not letting things get to you. I went to work with him a few times growing up and, maybe while we were in college, and man, when he was on the street, he was rock solid. I mean, I saw people yell at him and just, abuse him while he was at work. And man, he was like calm, cool, and collected the whole way. So that left, a real impression on me of, if I can achieve that level of being a person who's empathetic to others' needs and, someone who's really unwaverable in their approach to going to work every day, that, would set a very high bar for me to be able to aspire to. And that's what I tried to do every day of, being a leader in the Army, was being able to incorporate that into the things that I did. And, I'd like to think that I was fairly successful with it. But, in terms of examples, those are the couple of things that really stick out in my mind that I got from my folks.
Got you. And so this conversation, it can go one or two ways, right? We can talk about the trauma that you dealt with, growing up in grief, or we can talk about what's going on in, in today's society. And so I'll let you determine, which route we go down. But I'm going to ask you, What has been some of the trauma, the toughest trauma or grief that you've had to deal with, whether it be, childhood, military, or now?
The big thing that really changed my life was going to be that, deployment to Iraq. So we got sent to Iraq in August of 2007. I guess we were one of the last units of the infamous surge to go into country. And we started out with our battalion going into Baghdad, specifically a section on the south end of the city that had no coalition presence in there for a matter of months. So, criminals and the insurgents and everybody had really entrenched themselves back into the neighborhood. And it was a mess. It was a real mess. And we got tasked to go in there and clean it all up. We'd had a real successful train up prior to that. So we felt good when we were deploying that, we were a fantastic unit. We had really great leaders. We knew all the right things to do. Man, the very first night that we went out, it wasn't even the whole platoon. It was just me riding with the guys that we were taking over for. Took sniper fire. We had anti-tank grenades thrown at us, and it was just an eye-opening experience to say, wait a minute, training was nothing like this. Like, this is real. And it just, things kind of went on. And then it was just like somebody dropped a hat, and, we kicked the hornet's nest. And September 18th, 2007, the company took its first casualty. Happened in the platoon of one of our classmates. It was kind of the first eye-opening experience to say, wait a minute, this is real. This isn't training at the Hohenfels in Germany where you wait an hour and the OCs will bring you back to life. Like, this kid's gone. 2 days after that, my platoon got ambushed, and we took a casualty, but we got them out of there. And, man, we turned it around. We just went toe-to-toe with these guys, and we got a lot of them in the process, a lot. We dropped a lot of ordnance, killed a lot of them in that day, and we kind of went back into, all right, we're pretty good. Like, we got this. We just fought off a huge ambush of multiple insurgents, and we just completely, punched them right in the face. And we were feeling pretty good. About a week and a half after that, September 29th, 2007, my platoon was tasked with trying to locate and cordon off some unexploded ordnance that the company from our battalion had found in the nighttime prior. We were out looking for it, and we had actually moved up to as far as where our commander told us to go. Last building that we needed to enter, it looked just like a normal kind of marketplace. There were people shopping at the vegetable stand. There was a guy sitting in a chair stitching up what looked to be like a sport coat. There was a doctor's office that people were going in and out of. And as we tried to get into the building, I don't know if it was a miscommunication or what, but I ended up telling. So I sent the first squad in, and we did know that they had run into a locked gate, and they were having trouble breaching the gate. They just couldn't get through it. Don't know how it happened, but I ended up sending the second squad around thinking that, the first guys had already gotten in. Lo and behold, we walked right into a sniper's kill zone, and they just opened up on us. I heard the shots ring out. I grabbed myself, my interpreter, and pushed them back behind the wall and got on the radio and said, hey, has anybody been hit? And one of the squad leaders came over, and he just goes, yeah. Like, well, who was it? And he goes, BA. And I was like, BA? And I was like, oh, man, that's Sergeant Ayers. And I was like, is it bad? And there was a pause, and he goes, yeah, it's real bad. Something compelled me to start running around the wall, and I didn't know it at the time, but my weapons squad leader had moved up behind me, and he grabbed me by that pull handle on the back of our IBA And he said, "Sir, keep your ass right here." And I was like, "F you, I'm going." He said, "No, you're not. If you turn that corner, I'm going to be picking you up off the ground too. Stay right here." Ended up getting a hold of our company commander, called the man down, gave him the building location. Somehow the communication got garbled and the medevac vehicle went to the wrong building. So we had to wait. I ended up making it around the corner, got into the building, and Sergeant Robert Ayers was laying there in the floor. They were doing chest compressions. He'd been shot in the neck. I got in there and I just took one glimpse at him and I was like, man, this is bad. He looked like he was sleeping. You know, he wasn't writhing in pain or anything. He just looked like he was asleep. I ended up getting on the radio, got the medevac in. We just by chance had our battalion PA out there with us. He came running into the building, did a scoop and run. And that's the part that scared me was, you know, they weren't trying to treat him while he was in the building. He, my medic, and I think our company first sergeant just grabbed him and literally just threw him in the back of the vehicle and sped off. Sometime after that, I don't fully remember this happening, but all the guys who were there said it did. That I think they tried to set an IED off on the medevac vehicle. Something exploded. We got the medevac vehicle out of there. We kind of collapsed our position, brought our vehicles up. They detonated another IED against one of my vehicles. Thank God they missed. Ended up having it pointed the wrong way. I mean, talk about the grace of God. Just the vehicle was parked 2 feet from it, and it blew the other way. We stayed out there. We tried to, do some follow-on stuff of trying to figure out what was going on. Meantime, I'm like freaking out inside, and I can go back to my training and can hear my commander saying, "You got to stay calm on the radio. If your people hear you freaking out, they're going to freak out." Whole time we're still getting shot at. We're still getting pot shots from it. We left that building, moved across the street, and started rounding up people, trying to, maybe get lucky and catch the guy that was shooting at us. While we were in this building, we were stacked up. Well, I shouldn't say stacked up. I had a squad up high in the building giving us overwatch security. I had a squad securing the door. And from the door was a long hallway that led into a stairwell and then opened up into a bedroom type of thing. We had walked over another IED and we didn't know it. That thing detonated. And I can remember the shockwave and what it looked like coming down the hallway and knocking down about a squad's worth of guys looking like bowling pins. And I remember thinking, this cannot be happening again. I can't be losing anybody. And the one kid that was right in front of me, I watched his eyes roll in the back of the head, and he just fell like a sack of potatoes. Hit the ground, and he kind of shook it off and came back to, and I was like, oh, thank you, God. We ended up getting relieved. I think our scout platoon came and relieved us. Ended up going to the hospital right there in Baghdad, and that's when the PA told us that, we'd lost Sergeant Ayers. A huge, devastating moment. You try as hard as you can to be a leader and be perfect. In our profession, being perfect means being able to keep all your guys alive and bring them back home. And I just felt like such an absolute failure. I kind of already had the deck stacked against me. I was an infantry lieutenant who didn't have a Ranger tab. So, the pressure to perform was even higher simply because, I hadn't completed Ranger school. So I always tried to, make things perfect. And I felt like this was a huge chink in my armor, was losing a soldier. I don't remember when, but at some point later, I started having really vivid, bad nightmares. I was back into that same cell phone shop that we had gotten into. I'm on the radio. I can just feel the dread and the terror. And then all of a sudden the radio doesn't work, or another night I couldn't find my weapon or something. And I would typically come to, wake up. I'm out of the bed. I'm on the other side of the room trying to take cover under a rucksack or something. One night I remember I got out of my room and came face to face with a couple of squad leaders from our sister company, and they were kind of startled when I came running out of the room. And they kind of looked at me, and I came to, and I gave them a head nod and turned around and, went back into my room. They never said anything about it, but I think they knew what was going on because things were starting to get pretty rough for us there. We ended up taking some more casualties in the company about a week and a half later, still having the same vivid nightmares. It was tough just to go to sleep no matter how tired you were because I just didn't want to keep reliving these nightmares. I mean, they were horrible. But let's face it, we're infantry lieutenants. We're tough. We're supposed to suck it up and move on and just be this, pillar of strength for our soldiers, because if we're freaking out, then things are going to go bad for them. I never really had the chance to sit and talk to anybody about it. Couple months later, we ended up moving out of Baghdad. We moved up north into the Diyala province. January 9th, 2008, our scout platoon walked into a house that was wired with explosives. It detonated. We had 6 KIA, including one of my former soldiers who had left the platoon after trying out and was being accepted into the recon platoon. Zachary McBride, it was huge. God, he was such a nice kid. I mean, such a nice kid. And we found out we were standing in the middle of an abandoned house. And the commander was like, y'all don't enter abandoned houses anymore. And I'm like, guys, carefully retrace your steps back out of this house. We need to get out. And I had to end up telling the platoon later on that night that, the scouts had taken an H-bed. I think we had 6 KIA, had about 9 more wounded. I mean, pretty much the whole scout platoon was gone in the blink of an eye. A couple days later, I ended up getting relieved of being a platoon leader after a mishap on a mortar incident. I don't know if it was just being tired or confused or what, but I ended up putting my platoon in a bad spot. And when we fired the mortar mission, the target was actually pretty much on top of us. Luckily, it didn't hit our vehicle. It landed right next to us. But, I ended up saying, hey, it's my fault. I'm the one who, called the mission. I moved the platoon to where we were. If anybody has to take the hit for this, it's me. And ended up getting moved into, battalion staff and going back to, you try to be as perfect as you can. And that was a huge blow, to go from being a line platoon leader for nearly 2 years to sitting in with all the staff guys. And so that was a difficult pill to swallow for me. It really was. I'm still having the nightmares, still difficult to go to sleep without seeing everything happen. Now, on top of that, we've got even more, the battalion itself is reeling from losing the scouts, everything. So it was a very, very tough time. After sitting in staff for a couple months, I got the chance to take some leave. And I had not said anything to my family about the really bad parts about what were going on. They had known that we had taken some casualties and that I'd lost sergeant airs. And one day, I don't know what prompted it, but it was yesterday. I was sitting in the driveway. I don't know what we were doing, and my mom and dad were out there. And I finally opened up to them about having the nightmares and the terrors and everything. My dad, for the first time ever, goes, you know what? For years, I had the same problem of coming home after working on the street and not being able to sleep and having nightmares. It was like an instantaneous, I just felt the weight go off my shoulders of like, I'm human. Like somebody else has experienced this. It's not just me going through this. I mean, keep in mind, my company commander never asked how I was doing. The other platoon leaders, we didn't talk about it because we weren't going to dare show a weakness in front of each other. I couldn't talk to my platoon sergeant about it. So, who else did I really have? I didn't have anybody that I felt in the unit that I could talk to. And just that moment standing in the driveway, man, it was like life changing just to be able to know that I was normal. I was a normal human being experiencing normal things. And when I went back after leave, I was on a high note. You know, they ended up giving me a chance to lead a platoon again. I finished the deployment on a very high note. You know, things were good. It was just that moment of just being able to sit and talk to my parents and just be made to feel like a human being again was good. Everything was good until we got back to Germany. Went back to basically an empty apartment that had a little bit of food, a couple of beers from the wives who had access to our apartment. You know, they left some food and stuff in there for us when we got back, which was great. I'll tell you what's maddening is, you know, you're on a fob, you're used to background noise. You know, we had aircraft flying, we had strikers going in and out all night, you had generators, you had that noisy air conditioner that just, you know, sounded like a dinosaur coming through the jungle. Get back to Germany where there's mandatory quiet laws at 8 o'clock at night. And it was just so quiet, like you could hear your own heartbeat. And it was maddening. I was left alone with all my thoughts, and it drove me crazy. I end people back in my mind. All right, I'm going to call somebody, man. I even started calling people in Hawaii, knowing that they were 12 hours different, just to be able to have somebody to talk to. I couldn't stand to be by myself, which then, after you've been on the phone all night, leads to exhaustion. First time I'm telling anybody this, I was in the 3 shop at the time. Hey, sir, my car won't start. You know, I'm going to find somebody that lives around me in the town that we were living in to give me a jump, and then I'll be in, and, you know, I would go back and take an hour or so nap and then come back in. And he'd say, oh, you know, did you get a jump? Yeah. I'm going to go get sleep, and tossing and turning all night. I was a zombie. And, you know, kind of add that up over a couple of months. There came a point when, you know, I'd called in to PT a few times. I was sitting in the battalion headquarters, and something broke, and I said, today's the day. I've got to do something. I have to do this today, or I don't know what's going to happen. We had a new battalion chaplain, not the guy that we deployed with. And I went downstairs and asked him if he had the number, just kind of nonchalantly. I was like, hey, man, question for you. Did you happen to have the number over to mental health? And he looked like he had about a million things going on other than just me asking him this question. I didn't get an answer from him, and I stormed back upstairs. I found the post phone book, and I didn't want anybody to know what was going on. So I went out the fire escape, stood outside in January in Germany, snow on the ground, it's freezing cold, and called every number I could in that phone book until I finally found mental health. I think some young kid answered the phone, and I'm like, my name is Captain Owens. Something's going on. You're going to make me an appointment today, or I'm going to walk into the office. God bless this young kid. They're like, okay, hold on. It came back and said, can you be here at 1400? Like, yes, I will be there at 1400. Got off the phone. I walked upstairs, and I literally walked into my boss's office. I don't even know if there was a meeting going on or if he was on the phone or something. I walked in and I closed the door. And for the first time, I looked at somebody and I said, sir, I don't know what's going on. Something is wrong. I can't sleep. I'm not who I should be. I just made an appointment with mental health. I'm telling you as a courtesy that I'm going. I loved our 3. He just looked at me and he said, Eric, you do what you have to do. If you need time off, it's yours. Just let me know what you need. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, that was like the first time I'd ever opened up to somebody to admit to the fact that I had something going on. And he was so open to it. It was great.
Hey guys, it's Jerome. Greg and I wanted to invite you to the community that we created for the whole Guards Down family. jump on Facebook or check the show notes for the Guards Down Facebook group. There you'll be able to find a community of folks who are committed to raising awareness about complex grief and PTSD. Look forward to chatting with you guys in the group. Now let's get back to the episode.
I had my first appointment with a mental health provider later that day, and it was it wasn't an Army psychiatrist. It was just a civilian. I don't know how he ended up in Vilseck, Germany, in the mental health department, but he was there, and it was like talking to my old man. Very laid back, non-judgmental. I just got to get things off my chest, and for me, it was just constantly trying to process what we had seen and what had happened. I mean, we saw so much just death and destruction of retaking that neighborhood in Baghdad. And then when we moved up to Diyala, it was basically an Al-Qaeda trading ground. And, we were finding mass graves and people that had been executed. And I mean, kind of the worst stuff that you see in movies, man, we were seeing this on a daily basis. And to get through all that, I really turned myself off from being human. I had to take all my human emotions and just turn them off. And then just out of the blue, you get on a plane, you fly back to Germany, you're living in an empty apartment where there's quiet, and you're expected to be a normal human being. That's not something that comes easy. And it drove me crazy. And I didn't feel like I could say anything to any of the other, now captains at the time, even though some of them were our classmates. Some, I was probably some of my closest friends. It was just nobody talked about it. There was this unwritten stigma of, infantry guys don't complain. We're hard, we're infantry. We can't say anything. I don't know if anybody else was struggling. Nobody. I mean, we just put on such a face. You showed up, you did your work. You were a hard charging infantry guy. So I went through a few months of counseling, which really made such a difference. It just being able to talk to somebody was incredible. Ended up moving back to the States, which was very cathartic for me, of just separating myself from, kind of a semi-negative environment. Ended up, taking command at Benning, and, while I was there, met my wife, and, she's been a big rock for me to lean on. She knows most of the things. I haven't gone into the really intricate details that, I don't know if anybody really wants to know the really bad parts and the details, but, she's been a big rock for me to lean on to get through those bad times that have, since then. And, she's lost, her mom to cancer long before we met. So, she's had some experience in, dealing with trauma and working through her own grief. And, I come in and I'm trying to process mine. And even when we were, even after we'd been married for a while, I'm really, to this day, I'm still trying to make sure, I'm 100%, well, I shouldn't say I'm 100%, but getting over everything is a process, man. It's not just go to the doctor, it's one-stop shopping and all of a sudden you're better. It's a process that varies for every person. So she's been very good at, helping me get through the tough times and allowing me to lean on her when I need it.
Man, wow. I didn't know all of that. And I connected with everything you said. It's so many things to just like get into and start to like peel the onion back. So being in the firefight and having one of your own that you train up, right, that you prepare, that you are responsible for, lose their life in combat, and you want to be at the front line because that's what's been instilled in us, to take the lead and not be able to make the kind of effect and change that you want so that you can save their life is one thing. Also, listening to your not necessarily your peers, but your soldiers, your NCOs, right, that have your back. When he grabbed you by the collar and held you back and told you, hey, sir, you know, like, stay here or you'll be the next one. And you at least having that split second to breathe and take in what he was saying, you know, that in itself was big and probably saved your life as well, given the environment. And just to go through all of that you went through and to not be able to have someone to turn to, because my next question was, where was your chaplain at, you know, when you guys were deployed? You know, that's big. Your battalion commanders, your peers, all of us are out there putting on this front that, hey, look, this is what we got to do. So man the fuck up and get it done. And you just happen to do that. And all the while on the inside, that manly piece of you is slowly starting to break down because you don't know how to like internalize and process it. And when you told me that you finally had a moment with your dad, right? So you being a global war fighter and him being a local war fighter, right? In the sense of,
Yeah,
you know, foreign and domestic, and you guys being able to relate, I mean, that in itself is so powerful. I've had guests on previous shows where they talk about not having their father there or not really having someone that they can relate to. And most of them are having to learn these different coping mechanisms and skills from either the women in their family that are more emotionally connected than the men. And so for you to be able to have that type of connection with him and feel this sense of release and this sense of feeling human again, shoot, man, like that's a humbling experience in my book. And then the last part of you just, that ticking time bomb going off. Like, I definitely understand what you go through when you talk about being in dead silence. Most people think that it's calming, but for us who have had this active tempo, who has been around destruction on a daily basis, that calm, quiet is actually louder than anything else. And it will drive you insane. I mean, like, even to this day, I have to go to sleep with white noise, right? Because I have this loud ringing in my ear from, you know, this grenade that went off near me. And shoot, man, for me to sit in silence, like, drives me insane. And to have to deal with your thoughts and emotions all in one, and you just need something just to disrupt that so that, you know, you can have it. I'm with you. The insomnia and nightmares, the nightmares feel so real that you can't tell the difference between reality and dreams.
yeah,
And that's the scary part, because it's like, well, what do I know? You know what I mean? To be true.
yeah,
And so, you know, for me, I used to have to tell myself, and I wear this shirt, right? And it says, you know, good dudes.
yeah,
I used to have to tell myself, you know, in the morning, be a good person, right? Because I didn't know if this was the start of a bad dream or if this was reality. And my only thing was, you know, my character, my moral compass, which is what, you know, we were taught and instilled at school, was as long as you're doing the right thing, you know, you can't go wrong. And so that for me, what kept me honest, and I felt that when, you know, when you spoke on what you were going through, and to just have that final moment of, I can't take this shit no more. Like, I'm going to get help. And even though the military has resources and people in place that are supposed to help you, like the chaplain, but understanding everybody has their own daily fires that they're putting out, you know, themselves, taking the initiative to go get help. right, is like the biggest key, you know, that you said from all that. So man, like shit, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, you're asking about our chaplain. He had gone on emergency leave several times during the deployment, so he was never really around, and we never saw him. And the way that we operated, our guidance was to always have a presence within our assigned sector 24 hours. So we were always staggered, and when we went out like, God, I don't know, between 12 and 16 hours a day. So when we were back, we were either eating or sleeping or getting ready to go back out. And as a platoon leader, what are you supposed to do? You know, it's what you learned going through the basic course and everything else. You know, you plan, you prepare, you get ready. You know, priorities at work. Sleep comes last. And, you know, for me, I didn't really want to sleep because, to your point, I was starting not to be able to distinguish between what was real and what wasn't, because those nightmares were so vivid. And I never really felt like I had the ability to sit down and talk to anyone. And one of the other, you know, real challenges that I didn't mention before, while all this was going on, was when, you know, we started losing our classmates in the largest chunk that they did. So, you know, we lost Tom, we lost John, we lost, you know, Matt in Afghanistan. I was sitting down with one of our classmates. I'm sorry, I was going to get my laundry. And one of our classmates who had been hit by an IED a couple of days before and was stubborn and stayed in country and was walking around on a crutch, he came up to me. He's like, "Hey, did you hear about Tom?" And I'm like, "No, man, what's up?" And he's like, "He's dead." And it was like a, you know, ton of bricks hit me. And I'm like, "You gotta be like, no, not that of anybody, not Tom." Like, how? It was, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And then, you know, John a few days later, and man, we had just been through there taking detainees into the DHA. And it was almost becoming like incomprehensible that there was so much death and destruction going on. And here we are as leaders, supposed to be calm, cool, collected. You're supposed to have it together at all times.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, one of the challenges that I faced was right after we lost Sergeant Ayers. He was the team leader in my first squad. The other team leader, who had been one of the guys who was doing chest compressions on him while we were waiting for the medevac showed up, I told the guys to do something, and he looked at me and said, "No, I'm not going unless you bring the vehicle." What do you do? You know, this isn't something that West Point prepares you for. This isn't something that's covered in the basic course. There's no manual that, you know, you can go and refer to of, okay, I get told to F off by a team leader because he's terrified because he just saw, you know, one of his good friends take a bullet in the neck. You know, I ended up, you know, he did it to me twice. The first time it was, "Look, I know you're scared. We got a job to do, man. We've got to complete the mission." Second time he did it, I basically told him, "If you don't get out there, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. And don't you ever do this to me again, or I'll fire you right here and let you go sit in, you know, the battalion of talk answering radios all day." And got the message across, but, you know, it goes back to, you know, that empathy that I learned of. This guy was scared. He was all scared. He didn't want to go through that again. You know? But we were hard charging infantry guys. We had to keep going. So it became, you know, it was a leadership challenge of how do you keep your guys going forward and keeping yourself going forward while you look calm, cool, and collected, but inside you're just having this massive battle with everything that you're seeing. Yeah, and it was hell on earth for quite a while.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So going back to, you know, what you learned directly and indirectly from, you know, your childhood, what coping skills or techniques that you have to learn being in the military, you know, both healthy and unhealthy?
So my dad was a SWAT team cop, and he was always working out. So, I definitely tried to, work on fitness while I could, as much as you could. So that became a very positive thing. Even to this day, I still get up before dawn, try to get something in just because it's a good way to start the day off by getting those endorphins flowing. As far as negative, man, we definitely went down that route. In my desire to not sit in an empty apartment in a quiet German town, it was always, hey, man, let's go out. Let's go to the bar. Let's go to the club. Let's get together. Let's go do this. Well, dude, you're in Germany, man. It's like the beer capital of the world. So you just start drinking. Well, when you've had enough to drink, it's easy to go to sleep. And when you're craving sleep, that's a really good idea. So, man, we probably partied too much, drank too much. Never got into trouble, but, a part of that alarm bell that went off in my head was like, I just killed a whole rack of beer in about a day or two. I'm definitely not doing anything that is going to help myself in the long run. I really need to do something about it.
Yeah. And so those, and I'm only going to call it a destructive behavior just because it's, like you said, it's not helping you get better, right?
Yeah.
So what caused you to correct, some of your destructive behaviors?
I don't think I've ever really sat and asked myself what caused it. I was starting to feel as if I was losing the grasp of the person that I knew that I was. And I didn't like being that person that was always on edge, just being a dick to people, unnecessarily, always sitting around, having a beer, or just really not being able to sleep, which then leads to some compounding effects. Just all that kind of snowballed into just that day when the light bulb went off, and I just said, man, I got to do something. Like, I can't keep doing this. I have to do something else, because I'm definitely not going to be any better if I keep doing what I am.
Yeah. So what can someone do to support a person dealing with grief and PTSD?
Really just be there. Some of the best times that I've had have just being able to sit and talk about nothing, just mindless chatter, and maybe reliving something that happened, and just, it's cathartic to just be able to talk and just get it off your chest. So if somebody's trying to look to help someone who's struggling, just really be there for them. Be a sounding board or somebody to listen, or if you see them starting to struggle, maybe give them some encouragement. But on the flip side of it, if somebody's trying to help you, it's probably best, I would say, just allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you know that you have a problem and you're seeking help, keeping your armor and your shield up around you and having a facade that says, well, I'm a big tough grunt, we don't have problems, is not going to make it any better. If you allow yourself to be vulnerable and let people help you identify the problems that are going on, that's the only real path to anything getting better and finding a resolution for the long term. You can always solve things in the short term, but if you truly, let yourself be vulnerable and be honest to others about the problems that you're having, things will start to get better, because now you've taken off that coat of armor that you have. You've set it to the side and you've exposed your, most raw feelings and emotions. and then someone can, see what they need to do to be able to help you. And that's what I did with the counselor that I had. I just opened up to him about everything.
When it comes to,
I don't even know what I was telling this guy, but I was just telling him things, and he was taking it, and it was just good to get it off the plate.
Yeah. With the counselor that you open up to, because this leads into, the next topic that I was going to, speak on. I was going to ask, did you seek professional help? So obviously you did. Did it matter what they look like, their background for you? Because I know you were at that boiling point of, if I don't get help, like, shit's not going to be good. So, the person you spoke to, did it matter their background or experience?
No. I didn't really care what they looked like. I didn't care if they were in uniform or not. This guy ended up being a older gentleman, a civilian. I didn't care to someone. And I still felt that there wasn't anybody in the unit that I could talk to. As I mentioned, I only told my boss that I was going to mental health. I didn't tell him all the details, and I never mentioned anything to anybody there. I think he was the only one who knew that I had appointments once or twice a week, and I was going in to talk to the counselor. But I just so badly needed to talk to someone. I would have talked to a two-headed pink monster if they would have just sat and listened to me and just let me get off of my chest and start to put the pieces back together. I really didn't care. It made no difference what they looked like, whether they were in uniform, out of uniform. It just didn't matter one single bit.
Yeah, no, and I mean, at that point, it doesn't, when things are so frustrating to where you just need to get it off your chest. And as long as you have someone that understands who you are and where you're coming from, I think that's like the biggest key. I know with this whole thing, we're pushing cultural sensitive therapy, right? Where if your counselor, clinician, mentor, coach looks like you or has been through similar things you've been through, then the connection will be much deeper and the treatment will be more effective. But in cases where you're at that boiling point, seek help, right?
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to seek help. Getting ready to kind of wrap this up, what advice would you give your younger self or someone out there that might be going through the same thing you went through?
Man, if I could go back and talk to myself as a young lieutenant, I may have said you don't have to try to pick up the whole world and carry it yourself. After we lost Sergeant Ayers, I took that on my own. I didn't believe that, things at the time happened for a reason. I said, that was my fault. I sent that squad around the corner. That was my fault. I stacked too many guys up at the door and allowed them to get shot at, and ultimately he was killed. Whether that was right or wrong, I don't know, but man, I owned it, and I owned every mistake I did. And one was burdening myself with brick after brick after brick until I, had this load that I was carrying around that was just almost unbearable. It really put a strain on me, physically, emotionally, mentally. It just all kind of led up to where this thing's going to bury me, or I'm going to do something about it. So just don't try to feel like you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Step up and let people, help you out. If anybody else is going through, tough times, I would give them 2 points of advice. One, have somebody you can talk to. Of course I have my wife, I have my parents. I talk to them about different things at different times. There's certain things that I'll talk to my mom about. There's certain things that I'll talk to my dad about. And it's not that I prefer one over the other. It's just, there's certain things that a son likes to talk to his mom about. And there's certain things that, a guy likes to have a man, to be able to discuss things with. Of course, I have my wife, and then I have another, good friend of mine who's had his own struggles, and he understands what I'm going through, and I understand what he's going through. So that's good to have that support structure. Then, lastly, man, healing is a process. It's not, hey, here's a pill, take this, things are going to be better in the morning, or, here's one counseling session, things are going to get better. No, it's years, man. Like, I've had instances where, man, we were watching like a 4th of July or Memorial Day celebration on TV, and I just broke, man. I started crying. I was just, it exposed a raw nerve on me that I didn't realize that I had, and I just broke down right in front of my wife. And I don't know if the kids are in there or not, but, and, I realized I still had some healing left to do. But, that was several years ago. And looking back on it, it's a long journey, and it's a process. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but if you allow yourself the time to do so, things do get better. You are allowed to have a bad day. You are allowed to have a couple of bad days, but just don't let it compound itself to where a bad day turns into a bad week. A bad month will become, so on and so forth, to where you feel like you have this bad life, and, you need to take things, a long-term solution to a short-term problem. It doesn't get like that. Allow yourself to have a bad day, and you go and have a good workout, go fishing, go shoot basketball with your kids or something. Do something that's positive, and then one good positive thing will lead to another good positive thing. And then before you know it, you're back on the right track. So, having a bad day is not a bad thing. It's completely normal. It just reminds you that you are, in fact, human, and just do what you have to do to get right back onto the train again and keep moving forward.
Indeed. I like that, man. Okay, well, in closing, are there any efforts that you're doing or organizations that you want to, resources that you want to make known that's available, for someone to get help or to do their own research so that, they can start to help themselves?
I had researched the VA. They have a lot of resources, but the VA for me is over an hour away. So if someone's near a VA center, there's definitely a lot of resources there. I know a lot of guys who have reached out. I found a local primary care doctor who, he's like our age, he's married, he's got kids, he lives in the community. And I went in to talk to him one time, and he's like, there are a lot of veterans in the community here that, come to this practice, and we see this quite often. Like, we know what you're going through. And it's like, I completely understand. So don't be afraid to reach out and, maybe seek someone who is not affiliated with the military or the VA. Just having a sounding board, whether it be a local doctor or a counselor or something like that, is also a very good thing to have in your back pocket.
Indeed. All right. Well, I appreciate you, brother. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom you want to share?
It just, if somebody's struggling, man, just, I want you to know, it's kind of an cliche saying, but I would rather sit and listen to you call me on the phone and just talk about nothing for an hour or two than, have to, read a eulogy for 15 minutes at your funeral. Don't get so bogged down that you feel like you have to do something silly. Ask for help before things get to that point. We've seen too many instances where that's happened. My battalion, for example, man, we've lost several guys to not being able to fight their demons. And it really kind of rips at your heart when you see that. I just, why didn't you call me? Send me a Facebook message, or call me, do whatever you have to do. Just reach out. Just there are so many things out there that are available to you. You just gotta know how to get to it. But once you do, you're set.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, everyone, I appreciate all of you listening in. Eric, man, it's been phenomenal talking with you, brother, and I appreciate you sharing your story and insight and words of wisdom. To you all, this is Guards Down with Greg Washington and Eric Owens saying stay safe out there, stay focused, and stay engaged. We're out.
That's what it's really all about. Giving yourself a fighting chance to just show what you got.